Hi folks and welcome back. Now it might have been out for a while already, but I just recently played through it, and you may ask me, would I recommend Frostpunk? Well, the answer is a resounding yes. It's great fun, it's quite different to your typical city builder, it's stressful and challenging but in a good way, and you know what the best thing? It's often on sale, so check out my link to GOG.com down below if you fancy looking at picking this up, or if you want to see me blunder and fail my way through the entire game, then again, link down below to my entire playthrough. It's quite a short one, but it's good fun. So here's the story. It's the great age of steam. The Earth is bollocksed and a new ice age has brought an end to civilization as we know it. You control the last desperate band of survivors as they try to rebuild a new city and society before their balls all drop off from the cold. So Frostpunk is a city builder game, but with quite a heavy survival element to it as well. And it also feels like a real-time strategy game, but there's no enemies to combat, unless you count the cold and starvation, because those are serious threats all the time in this game. It starts at about -20 and gets down to -150, which is pretty damn cold, I think. It's the kind of weather that Geordies consider putting their big coat on for. The real challenge in the game lies in resource management and also keeping your people's needs and happiness in balance. Because trust me, if they don't think you're going to do a good job and look after them, you're going to be out there in the cold, mate. Now, I don't normally like city builder games, but I said I would wholeheartedly recommend Frostpunk, so what was it about the game that appealed to me most? Well, there's quite a lot to like, and to start with, this one is different from your run-of-the-mill city builder. You know those sort of games where you just set a few things off building and resources coming in, and you sit there eating a sandwich and drinking some tea, waiting for the resources to come up so you can upgrade the town hall, so you can build a new power station, so you can develop a brewing industry. Yeah, there's none of that in Frostpunk. This game feels so different. It also has elements of an RTS game with the resource gathering and population management side of things, but unlike RTS games, there's no enemies, there's no rival city or civilization to compete against in this at all. There's just the cold, the constant worry of the cold that gets worse and worse as the game goes on. In fact, the game is both stressful and challenging at times, and I actually like this because the game will throw situations at the player, and not just in the end game, but pretty soon out of the blocks, just as you start to learn how to build the city, how to get things going and resources coming in. All of a sudden, there's some event that happens. It might be some refugees turn up, and suddenly you've got to use your limited resources to find extra housing for these guys. You hadn't expected them to come along, but there's people sleeping out in the cold in -30 degrees, filling up your hospitals, taking up the attention of your doctors, and you know what? This makes people unhappy. You've got to deal with the order and the fallout from it. And the game will do this all the way through the campaign. Just when you think you've got things under control, it's cruising along, some event will kick off and you will get a load of crap dumped on you and you have to deal with it quickly. And I really like that. It means you can't just coast along on autopilot waiting for things to happen. You've got to proactively deal with things and prepare for things, and for any emergency. It's really good. And those stressful situations I mentioned, it's stressful in a good way, because when you overcome it or manage to beat it, it feels so rewarding. I actually like this. It really ups the pace and tempo and challenge of a game. Also, a lot of the events that kick off will be timed as well, and you've got to choose between trying to complete the event and rush to get the resources or the workforce in place to achieve it, or maybe let that event fail and pay the penalties in order and happiness that will come with that sort of failure. It's a tough choice to make, but the time limit on these things, well, again, that's something that you don't normally get in city builder games. Now, the game only has a few scenarios, and they don't vary much from one playthrough to another, but what I did like is that you can choose a different path to take in each one, i.e. a different style of gameplay. For example, the research tree is pretty big with lots of different techs and options available in there, but I found it next to impossible to research everything by the time a scenario would end. So it made me specialize in particular technologies and focus on the strengths of those. And that allows for a different playthrough every time. For example, in food production, you can focus on sending out hunters to gather what meat there is from the animals that are left in the world, or you can focus on trying to produce your own food in hothouses. There's different ways requiring different labor forces and different styles of management. Neither is wrong, but they will give you a different experience. The same with gathering other resources, and one of the best examples, child labour. Do you want to send the dirty little buggers to work in the mills and resource depots, or do you want to educate them instead so they can become apprentices, helping out your medical professionals or your researchers to improve recovery and research times? The choice is yours, and there's no wrong way of doing it, just a different one to give you a different experience when you play through the scenarios. I also liked how challenging these scenarios are the first time you play them. And it is in particular the first time because you don't know what to expect. You don't know when these horrible events are going to be piled on top of you. Once you've played them a couple of times, you do get to suspect or know when these things are coming, and you can prepare for them and the game gets easier. But the first playthrough is difficult. You will find it tricky, but with that comes the reward. If you are successful, if you manage to beat things, and I did beat the game by the skin of my teeth, that felt so good. And I love that feeling. A game has to be challenging in the first place to give you that feeling of reward when you manage to beat it. There are a ton of tough choices to make in Frostpunk. Doesn't matter which scenario you play, you'll have an event thrust upon you which suddenly makes you go, oh, do I do that? Or do I do this? And it's going to go bad either way, but which is going to be worse? For example, a load of refugees from another group of survivors suddenly turn up on your doorstep. Do you offer them housing and home and refuge and food? Or do you look at your dwindling resources and say, well, you know what, I can't heat the houses and the homes that I've got. I've still got people living on the streets and I'm barely feeding anyone. If I take in another 40 mouths to feed, it's only going to get worse. Do I turn them away and focus on keeping my current survivors alive? Or do I bring them in and maybe all hell will break loose as the hospitals fill up and it just all goes to shit? It's a tough choice. On the one hand, you get more workers. On the other hand, you get more workers to feed and house and home and keep happy. It's always going to be difficult choices, whatever you're given throughout the game, keeping people happy versus just keeping people alive. It can be difficult, and I really like that. Every decision feels like it's got consequences, and sometimes what the people think they want isn't actually what's best for them, and you've got to try and manage that. And one final thing that I really like about Frostpunk is that as it's been out for a couple of years, you can often find it on a hefty discount. Now, I do like it when games come on sale. It means that our gaming dollars go further. We get better value for money games. And of course, they've been out for a little while. They've been fixed and patched and improved since then. So that's the best time to buy them, right? So take a look around over the various platforms in the Christmas and New Year sales, because this one's likely to be discounted. I think it's currently discounted at GOG.com as well. So take a look at the link in the description if you want to pick it up cheap. But that's always the best time to buy games, and it adds even more value to this game, which I already think is a great game. And as always, on to a couple of things that I didn't like so much, or I felt a bit disappointed by with Frostpunk. And it's the main campaign. It was just a little bit short. Don't get me wrong, it's good, it's fun, there's a great story behind it, but it was over quicker. You see, you're playing as the last group of survivors building this city, and you know that at some point the mother of all storms is going to come in. It's going to drop to a ridiculously low temperature, and you have to prepare for that. And I thought there'd be several scenarios that led up to that, but it wasn't. It was all just in one scenario where it went on. And I really enjoyed it, but I wanted more of it. It was good, and the one problem with it, I suppose, is that every time you replay through that scenario, all the events, all the locations that you scout out are pretty much the same. It doesn't really vary. There's no randomness chucked in. There's a few random dice rolls with a couple of events on how they turn out, mostly when you scout out some new location on the map. It can go one of two ways, but really, it doesn't really vary. And after you've played it once, you kind of know when the various in-game events are going to trigger and when the big storm's going to come, and you kind of know what you have to do to prepare for that. So the first playthrough is definitely the best, and I just wish it was a bit longer, there's a bit more of it. And the other thing that I was a bit disappointed by is that the other scenarios, and there's I think 2 or 3 others, they just aren't as gripping as the main campaign. They're kind of like offshoot scenarios, where there's one where you have to look after humanity's last batch of seeds and you can't let the temperatures in the seed stores go too cold. And there's another one where you get wave after wave of refugees coming in from other groups of survivors that have found your city in the midst of all the snow and ice. and I found those just weren't as interesting or weren't as gripping as the main campaign. And sure enough, they're there to add variety so you can play it something a little bit different. I don't have a huge problem with them, but I definitely enjoyed the main campaign the most, and I wish there was some way of making that longer or bigger, or making more of it, if you understand. But really, those are just minor quibbles, and that was all that I could find to really dislike about the game. It's good fun, it's great value, especially if you pick it up with a sale, and it's quite different to most city builders, and I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it, and I would rate it a solid 8 out of 10, and it would score higher if there was either just a little bit more variety, a little bit more replayability, or if the main campaign could be lengthened somehow. But Frostpunk is a great game, I really enjoyed it, and I think you guys should go and check it out as well.